to west, looking on the city lights, flashing bright in my...
Hello and welcome to the Ken and McElroy Show. I'm your host, Danille, here with Ken.
Hello, everybody.
Sometimes, you guys, you don't know what I deal with.
Hey, good morning.
Good morning. We had a really fun weekend this weekend with the collective.
Yes, that was awesome. We had 50 people coming in from
Yep.
all over the world, and we had an incredible weekend of, group form training and speakers, and it was really, really, really fun. It's a mastermind that George Gammon and Jason and I do, and by the way, they're going to be here today.
Yeah, we're
So,
going to do some
yeah.
podcasts with them. We'll probably, those will be released probably in the next couple of weeks.
Jason lives in Florida, and George lives in Columbia, so it's cool to have them in town in Arizona. So we're going to do some content. For those of you guys don't follow them, you should, and we'll put their information up on the screen for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And anyway, so what else did we do this weekend? That was really it. We did a James Bond dinner Saturday night, which was super cool.
Yeah, that was fun. That was really fun. Black tie.
Yep,
So it was fun to do a black tie. You don't do those too often.
absolutely. So some general housekeeping is please like this video. We work really hard every week to bring you guys good content. So when you like it, it really helps us to promote it. Secondly is I have a webinar coming up on Wednesday with Jorge. He is an expert at Airbnb. He started from nothing. He was able to arbitrage basically as Airbnb other people's rentals. And then now he has bought rentals of his own. It's free and definitely sign up. It's kenmcroy.com/webinar. Like I said, it's free. There's no reason not to. Airbnb is a great way to get started if you don't have any real estate already.
Or any money. That's
or
the
any
thing.
money.
It's actually pretty interesting. You basically take somebody's place, pay them X, and then you get the difference. But there's a lot of hard work and hustle, and there's a business around it. But the other thing is Airbnbs, they're a little bit in trouble right now. So it's going to be really cool to hear what he has to say about that.
Absolutely. And you guys are able to ask him questions and everything during the webinar, and we try to answer everybody's questions.
Not
So make
everywhere. Markets are not the same everywhere, right?
Right. Yeah, they're not in trouble everywhere, but we are seeing some slowing down
In
for
some
sure.
markets.
So today we are talking about why the Fed is getting worried.
Who is it getting worried? My gosh, not just the Fed. It's funny. I don't think that people believed that the Fed was going to do what they've done, which is they've raised rates 6 times since March.
Yeah. So something interesting I found out, and maybe some of you know this, I didn't know this, that the Fed has some opposing things that's responsible for. So the Fed is responsible for maintaining employment.
They are.
Which is different from different central banks all over the world. So they are in charge of maintaining employment. However, they're also in charge of keeping inflation around 2%.
Right.
So that is why it was so impactful that Jerome Powell has been saying we're making inflation our primary goal no matter what at this time, because what that means is he didn't really care. He knows it's going to affect employment. And as of right now, that's a secondary issue.
Right. I think they basically said that they were going to do this. Their target, if you go to the Federal Reserve's website, their target is 2%. It's something that they're certainly trying to do. Of course, we're over 8 right now. It was interesting. The employment numbers came out last week, and they were actually pretty positive. I think we're at 3.7% unemployment, but lots of criticism around that. One of the tweets I read was what Biden's failing to say is that we're up 200,000 in part-time jobs and down over 400,000 in full-time jobs. So I think that's very interesting. If you take a look at that, including the labor participation rate, yeah, it's a little bit concerning. I started to dig a little bit on this issue. I was like, why are the employment numbers not jumping, with all these cost increases? Because I'm hearing from my friends, people that own businesses, that things are getting tighter. And they're having to cut back, specifically in the real estate business, which we're in. We're seeing mortgage companies reduce their work. I mean, you think about it. When sales go down in real estate, realtors make less, title companies make less, mortgage companies make less, contractors make less. Like there's a ripple effect around all of it, but it isn't showing up yet.
Yeah, we're definitely not seeing the employment numbers being adjusted yet, but we're definitely going to be. And it's to your point, I've been talking to a lot of people who are very concerned about their job and looking for different jobs in different industries outside of real estate. So the real estate market's getting hit, obviously, the hardest as far as, no loans, no mortgages, that kind of thing. But I think the Fed is getting worried because I don't think that they thought these rate increases would not so far be working on inflation.
Well, I did a video on this. It's coming out Friday. Is that right, Jerry? Yeah. And there's one big reason, and it's called lag. So if you look at some of the words buried in all this, in a lot of this journalism, and even in Powell himself, he says, Powell, chairman of the Fed, said, you will see higher unemployment, period. And there is a lag effect. And so we're just in the middle of this lag effect. And by the way, let's don't forget, they're projected to raise them again on December 5th and again in 2023. They're going to do whatever they have to do to slow this thing down.
So do you think it's different this time because there's a lot of supply chain involved? Like, we don't really have control of the energy cost like we did, and we certainly don't have control of the oil costs based on everything that's been happening. So do you think that maybe raising rates wouldn't be as effective now as it's been in the past because of those two things?
Well, I think what the Fed was looking at are these asset bubbles. So you got to look at the other side of it. When we went down to almost zero federal funds rate, and not quite zero, but almost zero, that created a lot of people to be consuming autos, consuming, day-to-day things, consuming real estate. People were buying real estate at these very cheap numbers. It created this asset bubble. That, in addition to all the money we injected. By the way, if you look, just Google what's going on in the UK or Google what's going on in some of these other countries, there's a lot of countries experiencing pretty high inflation. And there's a lot of countries now that are experiencing unemployment even. So this is, as we've talked about before, this is in a lot of respects a worldwide issue, these inflation. So I do think that the Fed is more concerned about inflation, clearly, than they are interest rates. Because as real estate goes up, it's inflationary by definition. So, so now it's coming down, it's stabilizing. You're starting to see homes on the market longer. Remember, if something was on the market for a week, that was the average. That's not healthy.
Or normal.
Listed for a week. That's just not healthy or normal. So you can go back and look at history, and you can see that in most markets, a healthy or normal a number of listings is somewhere between 3 and 6 months of listings. So in other words, that's the amount of inventory. So we were way off of all this stuff, and the low federal funds rate was driving that before. So the only thing that's happening is it's reversing. Now, I also want you to know, I've been through a couple different cycles. If you look at history, 6%, 7% interest rates are still decent.
Yeah.
It's hard for people to wrap their head around because they were 3.
Well, I think it's more just how fast that they're going up.
Correct.
And the fact that nobody knows when they're going to stop going up. Plus, I think as we talk about, a lot of people bought things to maybe flip or whatever at 3%, and now they're looking at 7% rates.
That's the problem, and we've talked a lot about this issue. So who are the people that are the most in trouble? They're the ones that had an exit based on their current situation. Right? They didn't plan for the higher numbers. So the ones with no let's say, savings, the ones with no reserves, the ones that haven't anticipated that rates might go up. So think of value add projects, think of construction projects, think of anything that's short term at all, like a hard money, all that stuff. I have friends, we all have friends in the hard money or in the flipping business, and most of that money is hard money.
Mm-hmm.
And there's all kinds of adjustments going on around all that. I hear every single day, literally every day, some kind of story around somebody that's getting squeezed somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone keeps asking, what's going to break first, inflation or the economy, and that's kind of the question. They want inflation to break first so that they can have this like smooth landing. But realistically, 8 out of the 9 tightenings they have done have ended up in a recession or depression.
Right.
So they've only really succeeded one time in a smooth landing.
And to put things into perspective, in March, when they first started raising rates, inflation was 8.5%. And right now it's 8.3. Is that right, Jerry? 8.3, yeah. So essentially, it did get up to 9.1, and so it has come down a little bit. But there hasn't been a lot of change on the inflation side. And I think, cups of coffee, fuel, just normal, going out to dinner. We went out to dinner last night, and the bill was for 4 of us and we had 0 alcohol, and it was like $150.
And that was like a very basic,
That's
kind
what
of
I'm
restaurant.
saying. Like
Yeah.
things have gotten really expensive, and so I think that's what the Fed should be concerned about. Is it's hurting people's ability to just drive somewhere and then go eat.
Right, just the basic things.
Correct.
And then Brett made a good point on YouTube. He said, we all forget business owners got PPP loans. They got like a lot of money during COVID, and that's part of the inflation. But I wouldn't even just say it's part of the inflation, but it's part of why you hadn't seen businesses in trouble until now, right? Because they did get those PPP loans. These did help keep everybody employed, and they did help kind of improve the business. But now the business still has to run, and everybody is tighter on money than they were before COVID.
Yeah, it's a heck of a point, though, and on the other side of that, people got those stimmy checks. And so if you take a look at the savings rate, which I'm going to do a video on this, the savings rates are very, very low right now, personal savings. So that's not good. You take a look, it was in the trillions during the pandemic, and now it's quite low.
George Gammon said something to me. One drop on YouTube said something. He said, monthly payments is the problem. We need higher interest rates and a lower home value. That's what equals
Correct.
a reasonable payment,
Yep.
not a high home value and a high interest rate. And that's true. And, we talked about this last week in seller denial, where we think this is going to be coming down. The housing prices are possibly going to be coming down. Even though a lot of people are locked in at those 3% loans. But what George Gammon told me yesterday, I was chatting with him, and he was telling me, interest rates like they did, I think he said 2014, but don't quote me on the year, they're going up, and he thinks interest rates are going to go back down, but it's going to be so much harder to qualify for a loan. And that's going to be the problem for the average person, is qualifying for that loan, whether that's due to a job change because you just got let go, or it's due to, your percentages on your bills rising, and then you have less available money. So it's not just the low rates, it's the qualifying for them. And I think we saw this in like 2008 or whatever, where nobody could qualify for the loan.
Right. So, that's a serious concern. So everybody's kind of hoping that the rates can go down. But then what does that really mean? You know what I mean? That's what he's saying. And by the way, we don't even know if that's going to happen. It's going to largely depend on what happens with inflation. So we're all hoping that inflation will go down in the fourth quarter here, certainly in November and December and January in the first quarter. I really, really hope it does, because the higher interest rates are killing everyone. and us included. We're in the middle of construction on projects, and those are floating loans. Luckily, we have the cash to cover them, but we weren't anticipating that much higher of a loan payment. Same thing on our bridge or our renovation loans. Same thing. And so anybody that's done any kind of value add or construction during this time, as far as as far as renovations, then of course they're actually in those kinds of loans. Same thing with hard money.
And Sarah mentioned, they're going to come out with a 40-year mortgage. They've already done that. There are 40-year mortgages available. Mo was on a while ago to discuss that. And you're right, because 40-year mortgage is going to possibly increase housing prices if people can qualify for them, because it lowers their down payment. But, there's other things going on too, beyond that, right? It's going to be qualifying for the mortgage is going to be the hard part.
Well, the other one is, I think, which was a question you had earlier, is we talk about this a lot. People they solve to the monthly payment. So if you're bringing in $2,000 in rent, let's say, and that's your income, and you have $500 of expenses, and your mortgage payment is $1,000, then you make $500 a month in net cash flow. If the mortgage payment goes up to $1,500, you pass on that deal because your expenses are still $500, your mortgage payment's $1,500, and your rent, of course, is $2,000. So why would you buy something like that with no cash flow? So the variable here is the mortgage payment and the cost of that debt. And I think somebody said it earlier, the price of that house has to come down. The price of that fourplex, the price of that apartment building, that has to come down because that mortgage payment is going up. If all things being equal, if cash flow doesn't change that much, then you're solving to this mortgage payment, and that's then going to drive these prices less, and only not because the buyer's going to have some leverage on the people. The buyer's just going to look at it practically and go, we don't have the cash flow to be able to buy this. We're not going to buy this. We're going to pass. The seller is now going to be in a situation where they're going to have to match that for the buyer. They're going to have to adjust their pricing in order for the buying to continue.
Absolutely. And Dee Dee said something interesting. They said, right, but housing prices coming down does not prevent the cash buyers at the top from purchasing.
That's right.
Money supply at the top doesn't care about interest rates. And you're right, but money supply at the top is waiting for prices to come down. That's why it's very stagnant right now.
Yeah, and don't forget, there's another thing for the cash buyers, and this is really a good question. The cash buyers, of course, they don't have a financing issue. But where does the money come from a cash buyer? You have to think of that. So that's managed money, and they're looking for a return. So the question is a cash buyer, let's say they buy something at $500 cash, is that house going to be worth $500 later? If it isn't, then they lose money. If it is, if that house goes up, then of course they make money, all things being equal. So it's true, cash buyers don't have to go through financing, but remember, there's a cost of equity. Don't forget, cost of equity. And so if that is a hard money, let's say, which is somewhere between 8 and 12%, I'm seeing, well, that's real money. So if that $500,000 at 10% is 50 grand. That's what they, that. So the way that those people get paid back is if that house goes up. So don't forget that you don't want to catch a falling knife here. So a cash buyer, if there's no cash flow, is completely banking on that house price going up. That's how they make money.
Absolutely. And people on here on YouTube are, commenting how, oil prices are really going to dictate inflation. And I do agree with that because, that's energy, that's gas, that's groceries. George had mentioned to me yesterday, and we're going to have him on. Jerry, will George's podcast go on next Wednesday, do you think?
Probably 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay. So in a couple of weeks, we're going to have George's podcast released, and Real Estate Strategies podcast is our podcast. And you definitely want to listen to that because he's an expert on all of these things. But basically, he was saying, our dollar is strengthening, though, which is helping us buy things like oil and things like that. So that is...
Which is pissing off the world, by the way.
It is pissing off the world,
right?
Yes.
We just got back from an international trip. People are like, we don't like your strong dollar. Remember, it hurts other people. right?
It hurts other countries.
Other countries,
Mhm.
yeah.
Absolutely. And so it's all very, but what can you do? Like what can you do in all this time, really? And, just be prepared. Prices are going to come down. And if you're somebody like my brother, who I talked a little bit about my brother last week, is that, he is looking to buy a house right now. And it's for him and his family to live in. He already has a home, but he's upgrading. You need to wait, right? And I was talking to him about waiting, and he called me yesterday and was like, "You're right, Danille. Like, these houses were flying off the market, and the one we looked at, 2 weeks ago is still there." And I'm like, "Absolutely," because he was a little bit in denial that was happening in his market. So I think that if you are looking to buy a home to live in, you should wait for prices to come down. You might get a higher interest rate, but we really think prices are going to kind of take a hit. If it's an investment, however, if it cash flows, you're fine either way.
But depending on the equity. So I think you're right. In some respects, if something cash flows and you can fix the debt, then it's still a good time to buy it. We're still looking. In your brother's case, who wants to buy anything that's going to be worth less? Nobody. So if you're buying, again, a $500,000 house that's going to be worth $450,000 in a year or two or even less, then you're going to wait. Maybe. But we've all been in this situation before where it depends on the scenario of the buyer. If it's somebody that's moving in like a family and they can lock their monthly and they're good, then it's probably not as big of a deal because they're not trying to exit. But people that are trying to exit, that becomes the problem. How do you time interest rates? How do you time pricing? You can't, especially now. And so that's the issue with your brother. Like the house I live in, I built. And I built arguably at one of the worst times to build, even though I'm in the business. And so it cost whatever, and the house was worth just a little bit less or about the same for a long time. And then it went way up, in this last little run we had. I don't know where it'll end up, but the point is, it's my home. I don't care.
Right.
I mean, I don't want to, obviously sell it and lose money, but that's what happened in '08. Is people had to write a check to get out of deals, or they defaulted and gave them back to the banks. So that's what we want to try to avoid this time around.
Yeah, and Yancey said, the major hurdle for inflation to go down is driven by the amount of savings the average family has. Everyone has money right now. Savings accounts for the average family are at historical levels.
They're low. If you really take a look, I just looked at this morning. It's if you look at, I'll tell you exactly because I wrote it down. There's a website that you guys can look at that I think would be very helpful to you, and it is the, let's see, corporate profit, personal savings rates. So you go to the FRED. FRED, and you take a look at national account, and then you look at national income and products, and you'll take a look at what's called the personal savings rates. Right now they're at 3.1%, and this is by the Federal Reserve. So just take a look, and you'll see how the trillions have gone down. So that's one of the things I'm a little concerned about.
Yeah, because savings rates, we know a lot of people that are strapped right now, actually. Especially your middle class people are very strapped, because think about it. How could they not be strapped? Their gases went up astronomically. Their groceries have went up. Winter's coming. The heat their home's going to go up. And they're making, they probably made more money during COVID. They got like a raise, but it's not keeping up with inflation and all of these extra costs.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is these midterms, which, by the way, tomorrow is, obviously a big day. And, it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. But I've been trying to dig because people have been telling me that both sides, Republican or Democrat, are trying to bury big issues, right? So it'll be interesting to see what actually comes out in November and December. And it'll be very, very, very interesting to see, because the elections will be over, at least for the midterms, and there'll be some changes, of course. But it feels to me like things are things are not good going into this winter.
Well, and also, we didn't even mention that with this non-fixed rate debt, credit cards, car payments, everything's going up. So not only are, your average, your bills going up that you pay for weekly, but the things you have leveraged are going up if it's not fixed, and very few things are fixed other than maybe a mortgage.
Right. So again, that's a part of this video I do on Friday is, credit cards are projected to go over 20% next year. Think about that. So if you have I think the average balance was around $6,000 when I last looked. So 20% is $1,200. That's $100 a month, right? Just on the balance. So think about that. You're paying $1,200 on $6,000. That's nuts. Same thing with HELOCs. Same thing with auto loans. Same thing with private student debt. All of that stuff is impacted with these higher rates. We're talking about 100 here, 200 here, and we're not even talking about mortgages. Especially if you have a HELOC. If you have a HELOC and you've pulled out the money at $50,000 or $100,000, and that's gone up 3 or 4%, that's significant. That's $200 or $300 more a month. So these are starting to creep in.
Absolutely, and there's not typically caps on these HELOCs. So, and if they are, they're very high. Ren Stu had a question. I don't know if you're going to know this. He said, does the Fred savings account number include non-traditional savings accounts like brokerage?
I don't know. That's a great question. I can definitely dig into that. I think that it's easy to figure out. I think a lot of people that have low savings might not even have those accounts.
Right.
And I think that, many people are in survival mode, but it is a heck of a good question.
Absolutely. And make sure you are liking the video. It really helps us out, really helps us promote this. Please please subscribe. We do these every single Monday at 11. Also, I have a free webinar on Wednesday with Jorge from Airbnb. He knows his stuff. He has a ton of Airbnbs. He cash flows a lot every single month. He got started with nothing. You'll be able to ask him questions. It's free, kenmcroy.com/webinar, and it's at 5 o'clock Arizona time. If you miss it and you register, we will send you the video.
Right.
And let's get the likes over 100 people. Come on. There's 600 people watching right now. So...
By the way, thank you for watching.
Matthew is asking a good question. He said, can you mention something about equity on a rental, even if it has fixed debt and cash flowed? Did I miss what you said about why the equity matters?
Oh, sure. Okay. So a lot of people think of, just think of money, just period. Just put money in a category. So money could be either debt or equity. Right? So if it's debt, it's like a loan, a hard money, let's say, or whatever you want to classify it. But there's equity is, if you're trying to move something, let's say, from a savings rate of 1% into something else, then, especially if you're raising it. If you're raising money from somebody, they want to be paid on that money. So if I take $100,000 from you, you want a return on that. So there's a cost of equity, and typically the cost of equity is actually higher than debt. So think about it as a hard money, let's say. If a hard money loan it actually could be considered hard money equity. It just as there's a cost on it. So maybe it's given to you at 8%, 10%, 12%. So when I raise money or syndicators raise money, there's a cost. Like an investor gives somebody money because they want a return. So, that might be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9% on the equity. So that's what I meant by there's equity and there's debt. What's really interesting is when you combine the two, that's called the blended cost of money. So if you really want to, for simplicity, if you get 200 grand, let's say 50 or 100 in equity and 100 in debt, and the debt is priced at, let's say, 8%, and the equity is priced at 10, your blended cost is 9%. If your debt is priced at 6 and your equity is priced at 8 using 100, then your blended cost is 7. So you always have to solve to your cost of capital, cost of money. And so that you're just looking constantly at the two combined. And so there is a cost of equity. If it's your savings, let's say, then you're moving it from something. George was telling us yesterday that you can get these 6-month T-bills over 4%, let's say. So you're competing with other things. So you don't have to have it in a savings account. There are other things that make money, not just real estate. So there's a cost. You always got to be considering the cost of equity.
Yeah, absolutely. And then people, let's see. Sorry, I had a really good question, but I lost it because sometimes I do that, guys. No.
Look, here, I got a question for you.
What?
Do you think the Fed's really going to hit their 2% inflation goal?
No.
Like,
they're definitely not going to hit 2%. There's just no way they can.
I mean, think about that, guys. It wasn't that long ago. It was at 2. So, and they haven't been able to do it with 6 rate increases, right? So it's interesting to me that that's still on the radar. There's a lot of people that don't think that they're going to come close.
Absolutely.
Stay with me.
I am looking for questions. Okay, so we're going to move to our inner circle questions. These are questions that you can ask every single week to Ken, and he will respond to you. It's $30 a month to be part of the inner circle. We also do monthly happy hours, book clubs as well. Okay, so Sophie wants to know, how and where can I find people that have money that are investing right now? Can you suggest some resources where we can read to keep on top of it?
Yeah, so it's a crazy time to be looking, but there's a fair amount of money still looking that has come out of the stock market because the stock market's been volatile. There's a fair amount of money that's coming out of real estate and into savings. So I think that some of the better places are to go to some of these syndicator workshops. They're all over the country. I don't do them, but there are plenty of people raising plenty of money right now. Another great way is to get with some of these accredited investor groups. There are people that are looking for investments at all times. They're typically very sophisticated, and those are all over LinkedIn, all over Facebook. So there's plenty of money. You just got to put yourself in the right place.
And she also wanted to know, how do I know what people with money are investing in right now?
All they can do is tell you. So there's no magic website that says, here's what I'm investing in. But I think you just ask. Some people like land, some people like new construction, some people like value adds, some like mobile homes, some like self-storage, some like apartments, some like condos, some like single family. It's all over the map. So, and me personally, I like everything. I like businesses. I like, I'm investing in all kinds of things, and even non-traditional real estate. And I think one of the things that you might be interested in is in June, on June 15th, we do an expo, Limitless, actually the Financial Freedom Expo, and that's going to be in mid-June in Scottsdale. So we did that last year, and we sold out. It was awesome. And what we try to do in those kinds of meetings is we bring in all kinds of people that are investing in all kinds of things. So these side hustles. So I specifically am in charge of the speakers. So I brought a crypto guy in. I brought a mobile home guy in. I brought a self-storage guy in. We brought a bunch of flippers in. Obviously, I talked a lot about multifamily. We had office guys. We had people that were doing tech startups and all kinds of things. And we had the whole Rich Dad team there as well, which, of course, like Tom Wheelwright, who manages all kinds of people's accounting, and they're in all kinds of different businesses. So, and I think that if you want to go somewhere into an environment where there's going to be lots of people looking for lots of different kinds of investments, that's going to be the spot this year, because we're heading into rough water, in my opinion. Rates are high, a significant difference from the last limitless that we had in June, which again, we sold out. And so I think we're going to stick it on the screen here, Jerry, for anybody that might be interested. There's an early bird. The prices go up basically every month from next month. So if you guys are interested, this is the lowest price it'll be. It's going to be $15.99. And by the way, for VIP, it's even more. And I just think that might be a really good forum for a lot of people, because people are going to be frustrated, confused. They're going to be looking for other things, just like that question we had. I think it's going to be great.
Absolutely. So, and then Chris said he has a friend lending to him at 5% and that he wouldn't have had the opportunity if he wouldn't have asked.
I would buy that. I would take that money all day long.
5%
man.
is
5%,
like very, very good.
I would borrow, man, because you can make more than 5% right now, and that's cheap money. That's very, very good.
Absolutely. So from our inner circle, ST asked, since this is a real estate channel, what do you think of Bitcoin as a digital asset? Are you buying it?
I'm not. I don't understand it enough, to be honest. I'm not qualified to talk about Bitcoin. I've read a tremendous amount of books. How Bitcoin, you can buy it with real estate, and I've talked to so many different people. It feels to me like it does really well when it's hyped up, and a lot of people are buying it. What I get concerned about, and I know the Bitcoin people would probably come after me for this, but for me, I like collateral personally. I like something physical that I'm investing in that's worth something, and I don't like the volatility of it. I'm not against it, don't get me wrong, and I understand what's happening with currency, but the dollar's really strong right now. So, a lot of crypto people were jumping all over the crypto because the dollar was weakening and it was going to collapse and all that kind of stuff. And I do understand Bretton Woods. I do understand when we went to fiat currency. I had Mike Maloney in here last week talking about this exact thing. So, by the way, that podcast is coming out this week. So, for those of you guys who don't know Mike Maloney, he came in from Puerto Rico and we did a podcast. He's going to talk a lot about this. So, I'm not the guy, but for me personally, I'm not going to be all in on it like a lot of people.
Absolutely. And Eric on YouTube said, buy assets that provide income. So Anthony has something interesting. He said, Patrick Bet David said the next 2 years are going to be when you add a 0 or 2 to your net worth. How would you think that might happen?
Well, I by the way, I follow him. I think I love his stuff. He's not always spot on personally, but he is very, very, very smart, very bright. I think for those that are prepared, that very well could be the case. So I made almost everything I made in 08 to 2010 to 2011. So after things popped, we went in and bought 50 cents on the dollar, 60 cents on the dollar. We still own a lot of that property. And so I'd have to look at what he said specifically, but these asset bubbles are popping. And, you want to be able to buy after that, right? And then ride it back up. And long-term hold. I'm a long-term hold guy, so it's proven me to do very well for me. I get my tenants to pay off my assets, and it's been a really good model. Plus, I get all the tax benefits. So, save up your cash, get ready, be prepared, and get educated, because I agree with them.
So Andy from the Inner Circle wants to know, hi, Ken. We have an opportunity to demolish 2 properties that consist of 10 mixed-use units and turn it into a 20-unit building. How would you evaluate this to see if it makes sense?
So redevelopment is something that we do. So we're looking at 2 shopping centers right now, Ross and I, where stuff gets old, it gets dated, it gets vacant, it sits, and it's just math, honestly, from that point. So it's land plus demolition. plus all the soft costs to figure out what the 20 units are going to cost, plus what it's going to cost to build, and what it's going to be worth at the end. And so that's how we evaluate everything. I've looked at lots of redevelopment, ripping down office, ripping down retail. It happens. That's the point of all these opportunity zones. So, when Trump, whether you like him or not, rolled out the opportunity zone opportunities for people, what those were technically blighted areas, or areas that had this kind of stuff in it. And so he made it so that you could roll your capital gains into these things and redevelop areas. So I'm a big fan of redevelopment. I think that it makes a lot of sense, but financially it has to make sense.
Well, and you're also dealing with high costs of construction, and you're going to be in a loan that you're going to need to make a permanent loan at the end of the construction, and you don't know what the interest rate's going to be on that. So it is a risky time to do that if you don't know what you're doing.
That's right. And I had a conversation with somebody this morning. There's something called the GMP, or gross maximum price, that a general contractor gives you. They say, okay, we're going to be able to build this for you for $2 million. Those are not worth anything right now. Because think about it. If somebody gives you a bid for a roof or a framing or a concrete or whatever, and you go to the bank and you package all that up and you get a construction loan, if those costs go up for that contractor and now they're going to make zero, or their margins are really, really low, they're going to walk. They're not going to build it because they told you they were going to do it. They're not going to lose money. So the GMPs are being challenged right now. So be careful on your costs. And by the way, we've been building for 20 years, my company, and we're battling every day on all of these issues. And these are good people. These subcontractors are good people, but their costs they're getting killed. Their cost of concrete has gone up. Their cost of wire has gone up. Their cost of OSB has gone up. Appliances have gone up. Lumber has gone up. Now it went up. Now it's down, but it's still up. So, this stuff affects other people. These are ripple effects. And so just because you're a general contractor that says X, it might be correct on that day, but who knows what it's going to be by the time you actually start construction.
So Brett has a really good question, and I think a lot of people have this question right now. How did you recognize the bottom of the market in 2009 and know it was time to start buying in 10 to 12?
Yeah. So in hindsight, we look pretty smart, but the truth is there are some big red flags. The first one is we waited until everything went back to the bank. So in other words, I never started negotiating with sellers. So you got to let the stress from the seller, you don't want to be in the middle of that. So just let the seller deal with whatever they're dealing with the bank. The banks hate real estate. They don't want it. They're not supposed to own it. They're not set up to manage it. It's toxic. In other words, it's called real estate owned, or REO. It actually affects their rating as a bank. There's all kinds of problems with a bank doing a loan and taking it back. And then because, typically they're not, in many cases, the property might be worth less than the loan. So the bank takes the actual hit. So that's the first thing. We wait until that time. And at that time, again, we're solving to cash flow. So we don't, if I go back and look, maybe I bought some stuff too early, and maybe I bought some stuff too late. But I was just making it cash flow the whole time. There was one situation, I'll tell you, people can't believe it today. It just sounds incredible. But one of the banks came to us and said, we have a 200-unit building in Arlington, Texas. Would you take it over for the loan? At the time, the loan was like $9 or $10 million or something. And they came to us because we were a good operator. We had a good team. We were doing stuff. And I said, okay, let's take a look at it. Well, it was highly vacant, needed lots of work. Well, we figured it needed about $2 million worth of work. So first of all, no one's going to finance that. So it's seller finance, which is the bank. And then they were going to give us the amount of money to fix it. So they gave us the property, gave us the money to fix it, and we passed. Because what happened was when from the cost of the debt that they had and the amount of money that they were going to give us to fix it, we felt like the property still wasn't worth it when it was stabilized. So we solve all the way to the end. What is this thing going to be worth when it's stabilized? And we passed. So there are all these things that might look great, but again, to me, we were going to catch a falling knife on the debt. So the bank didn't want to do a write-down on their debt. And so they were trying to sell the property or give the property away for the cost of the debt, and they were trying to give it to somebody else that had good credit. But I was afraid of the end. So that's a great example of, but again, you're dealing with the banks at this point.
Yeah. And also, we never try to time the market. So, and I think that's where a lot of people got in trouble during just COVID is they could have, flipped their place and sold it, but they wanted to wait, right? They wanted to wait till they got the maximum value. So they wanted to wait till the market was at the peak because every month it would go up a little bit more and a little bit more. And they waited, and then some of them waited too long, and it all came crashing down, and they had to sell it for less than they wanted to, or they're still hanging on to it now, and maybe they're selling it for less than they even bought it for. So you also don't want to time the low of the market, right? So you don't want to wait and say, oh, this deal cash flow is going to be really good, but I think maybe next month it might go down more, because you're going to get yourself in the same predicament and somebody else is going to come in and buy that deal. So if the deal cash flows, you have to take the economy out of it on an investment property and just look at your cash return every single month. And don't try to time the highs or the lows, because that's where you really can get yourself in a bind.
That's a good point. And don't forget, guys, there's other things. Like everybody kind of looks at the market as the price of the real estate. That is important. But the price of the equity is important. The price of the debt is important. The property tax are important. Are they going up? Are they going down? The insurance costs are important. The operating costs are important. There's a lot of things that are important. Are people moving in? Are they moving out? Where's the market heading? Those are all important, not just price. So there are some markets where we might buy something on a cash flow side if we think that the market's about ready to trend up, because cash flow or rents, let's say, or the income is going to grow faster than the expenses. So in that particular case, you might buy, but it could also go the other way. So there's a lot more to consider than just the actual physical price.
Absolutely. You always have to keep the math in mind, and you don't ever want to try to plan for an exit in this kind of market. So if your strategy involves an exit at any point, it's not a good time for you. You want to be able to have patient equity and just be patient. There's a case to be made that if something cash flows today and your interest rate is 7%, there's a case to be made for that, because you're buying it at a 7% and it cash flows, and you can refinance later if the market goes down. If interest rates go down, like George thinks they're going to do, let's say a year or two, then you can always refinance. So, but again, you're solving to cash flow. So your 7% is covered by the tenant. Mm-hmm, absolutely. And people are asking, right now about HELOCs and HELoans. We have a lot of questions on that. Like, well, should I get a HELOC right now, or should I get a HELoan right now? I wouldn't recommend holding a large balance on anything that's adjustable for over a long period of time.
Yeah, you have to kind of look at the behavior of the banks too. Some of the banks are moving away from those.
Right.
So, they are... it depends on what you're doing with the money. So again, I always look at the price of the money versus the return on the money. So why do you need the money? If it's to save something, might not be a bad choice, let's say, or to cover something where you're just bleeding or hemorrhaging. But you want to be careful not to sacrifice the short term for the long term. You want to be careful not to get in too much debt. If the issue is an income issue, but if you're trying to save a deal, it might not be a bad choice.
Absolutely. And right now, you guys, what you really want to look at is as far as the Fed goes and the economy goes, after talking to George yesterday, the strength of our dollar is is interesting. So you should dive more into that because, we were just in Thailand. We were just in Bali. Very strong dollar right now. And this has happened before. And when it happened before, we met with a bunch of countries and agreed to lower the strength of our dollar.
Well, George told me something very cool. He has payroll in Colombia, and he said it's running around $7,000 a month for one of his businesses. And he said because the dollar's gotten stronger and the currency in Colombia hasn't, that it's now costing him around $4 in U.S. dollars.
Right.
So he's making U.S. dollars and paying the costs. So same people. But so they're getting squeezed, unfortunately. So he's using, again, this is a little complicated, but if you're getting paid in U.S. dollars and paying people in wages in Colombia, you have to consider the differences, the currency differences. So that's what we're talking about here.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, that wraps it up for today. Make sure to go to Limitless and get your ticket now. It's going to be an awesome conference. Get it now before prices go up. And we will see you guys next Monday at 11.
See you guys soon.